Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you once again for joining us for another wysiwyg webinar. I'm Igor Silva, Marketing Manager here at CAST, and today we're going to talk about R43. It's finally here. And we've had great feedback from users, and that makes us even more excited to tell you a bit more about R43. Dino Mazza, wysywyg's product manager, will walk you through the latest updates and features. We'll be going over 1 hour time for this webinar. There are lots to show, so please be patient. We welcome your questions as we will select and read a few of them at the end of the webinar. Questions needs to be typed and submitted. All attendees' mic will be muted by default. Without further ado, I introduce you, Dino Mazza.
Hey everyone, I'm Dino Mazza, and I'm excited to be here again today for my second webinar, this time to discuss the R43 release. And honestly, what a release. R43 is a huge achievement for CAST. We're really excited about this release, and we're really happy to see you, our users, also loving it. The R43 had one focus, converting to 64-bit architecture. Before I continue, I just want to mention that I'm really proud of the entire wysiwyg team. Though we released a little bit later than expected, it was definitely not due to a lack of effort here at CAST. After evaluating our status on this project in December after releasing R42, we knew that converting to 64-bit was close enough and could be achieved for R43, and our team put in a full effort. But with any project that you work on, there's always some unexpected challenges. But the guys identified the issues and found solutions right away. So kudos to everybody on the team. Thank you. And also a special thank you to our wysiwyg beta team as well. Your support during July to September was especially invaluable while testing beta 1 and beta 2. And on October 3rd, 2019, thanks to all the hard work by everyone, we released R43, our first release as a 64-bit architecture. One last thing before I move on, a membership note. Though delivered in October, R43 is officially a June release by membership requirements. As part of converting to 64-bit, many changes were necessary to complete this project. Many parts of our wysiwyg source code had to be updated, along with updates to third-party libraries, DLLs, resources, registries, installers. The list goes on. And because there are so many parts that make up wysiwyg, think of it as many mini projects or small projects to convert each module to complete the conversion and then have the entire large software project updated to 64-bit. Also, along the way, while doing the work, if we came across some optimizations that we identified, we worked on them to try to introduce them as well for R43, and we did do some. The benefits to switch to 64-bit. Converting wysiwyg to a 64-bit architecture removes the limitations associated with the 32-bit application. And I've listed for you some of these benefits. wysiwyg is now running as a native 64-bit application on your 64-bit Windows operating system. This now increases the amount of memory available to wysiwyg while it is running. And as a result, wysiwyg is able to open larger files, which previously were limited to only 4 gigabytes of memory or less. wysiwyg is more responsive throughout the application, as you are noticing across all modes and switching between them. wysiwyg is performing better overall, and in some cases, faster too. wysiwyg is compatible with other applications that are only available in 64-bit, and one of these is one of the features of R43, which is opening SketchUp files from versions 2017, 18, and 19. Overall, with the increased system memory and some optimizations introduced along the way, it's resulted in a more stable and higher performing software that can be noticed when you use the software. I know your expectations of 64-bit and the result of doubling performance or something like that was what you guys had in mind, but this is not always true. However, indirectly, we are now benefiting from having more system memory and more video memory. And along with some of the other advantages that I discussed already, you will see improvements and even sometimes higher frames per second, but every file will vary. And as always, our advice that we've published previously is still true for R43. Please use this extra memory wisely. Just because you can create larger files with more complex geometry doesn't mean it's beneficial to do so, because such files will naturally require more memory and more computation. Goals while converting to 64-bit? Well, that's simple. Deliver everything from R42 into R43, but now with a 64-bit architecture. We did our absolute best to deliver every feature, every tool, communication to all external clients. Whatever was previously in our 32-bit application, we wanted to deliver it for you in 64-bit in R43. Well, that's easier said than done. We managed to preserve majority of wysiwyg's functionality in our effort, probably close to 97 or 98%, but we had a few things that could not be converted, or it didn't make sense to put the effort to convert them anymore. I've listed a few of these for you in the bulleted list. First, the internal rendering within wysiwyg has been removed. The render wizard will now send all render jobs to the background rendering manager, which remains a separate 32-bit application. But this is not a complete loss. Second, since internal rendering can no longer be performed inside of wysiwyg, render previews are no longer available. And as a result, the render preview window in steps 7 and 8 of the render wizard will not display anything because the functionality is simply no longer inside of the wysiwyg software. Associated with the previous point, sliders for saturation and brightness in the render wizard will continue to work like before, even though there is no preview in the preview window. And finally, ETCnet is no longer supported in wysiwyg, and the ETC interface has been removed from the application options. However, wysiwyg files with EDMX universes can be opened in R43, and you are able to repatch your fixtures to regular DMX universes so that they can be used with ArtNet or SACN. I should also note here, we are currently using a DLL wrapper to preserve communication with existing console drivers that are in 32-bit until newer 64-bit drivers are created. We are currently in the process of converting more drivers to native 64-bit architecture, and we will be contacting more manufacturers shortly to work on some of these updates and have new 64-bit drivers soon. Though the main goal to deliver R43 was to deliver a 64-bit architecture, we were able to deliver some new features as part of R43 as well. Well, how do we do that? Well, some were possible because of the switch to 64-bit, like the ability to import SketchUp files from newer versions. Others were extensions to previous features that we had already worked on and were planning to do in a 32-bit application or a 64-bit application. We just finished them in R43 for you. And lastly, we had some features of R42 which were continued, and we made some enhancements in R43. So on this page, I listed all the features that we will be discussing today in the upcoming minutes of this webinar. With the 64-bit release now complete, our intent is to return back to our regular 6-month release schedule to have mid-year and end-year releases. But due to going overtime on R43, it is safe to say that R42 will deliver a smaller list of features, and it is still expected to be a December 2019 release. Okay, so since we have a lot of features to present, we felt it was easiest and most efficient to go through and detail each one of these features listed in a pre-recorded presentation and play it as a video for you to avoid pauses while switching features, while files are being loaded, etc. So enjoy, and we'll be back at the end to answer any of your questions. We made some updates in our options, as we usually do with each release. Some of these changes in application options were required as part of our conversion to 64-bit work, and some minor tweaks were also made to the document options and view options after receiving some user feedback. Let's start by looking at some of the updates in the application options, which are located in the Additional Interfaces tab. Before I go on any further, and before I forget, I want to point out for everyone that I'm using the colorful icons set across the top, as you can see here. I'm mentioning this because I will be using R42 in this webinar for comparison, and in R42 I have the orange icon set, as you can see here. And since I'm here, I will now open the application options and also go into the additional interfaces. And here we are. Let's examine the lower half of this window right in here where my cursor is. And let's go back to R43. And here we are. You see that there's two items that are different. First, there's the missing ETC interface tab. And secondly, there's a new PSN interface group in R43. I'll start with the PSN interface edition right here. Communication with PSN, or POSI StageNet protocol, was added in a previous release, but configuring it to work was a challenge in some cases for some users. So in this release, we've added the PSN interface group box with the properties to configure network settings similar to the group box above for RTTRPM. With the PSN interface, you can now specify the local address, the group address, and the port number to communicate with other computers or consoles sending PSN data into wysiwyg. If you do make a change to any one of these settings, when you click OK, wysiwyg will usually prompt you to restart the application since you've made some changes at the application level. So you would need to shut down and restart, and then when you restart, the data from PSN coming in will be retrieved and wysiwyg will visualize the movements in your file. Secondly, I mentioned the omission of the ETC interface group box. ETCnet2 or EDMX has been around in wysiwyg for a very long time, as we know, but it is only used with ETC consoles. And in recent years, many users prefer to use SACN or ArtNet rather than EDMX. So as part of our Convert wysiwyg to 64-bit effort, we decided this was one area which did not make sense for us to work on. We checked CEIP data, or Customer Experience Improvement data, which we've been collecting now for the past 5 years from you, and we found that the feature was not used very much. Actually, it was used very rarely. So we've taken out the EDMX interface and its communication in R43 as part of our 64-bit work. We will still allow your old files which are patched with EDMX to open in wysiwyg R43, as this enables you to bring in the file, and then using wysiwyg's patching tools, you can recreate your patch across standard DMX universes. So let's have a look at this. Close here, and I will open a file with EDMX. This is a file that I created which has some fixtures patched to an EDMX universe. So in these cases, there is a new dialog displayed when opening a file which contains an EDMX universe in it to warn you that the EDMX functionality is no longer supported, and if live mode simulation is required with this file, you must first repatch your fixtures to DMX universes. So I'll click OK now. Okay, here is the file that I created. It's just a simple file with 2 pipes and 30 fixtures. and all these fixtures are patched to the EDMX universe. I'll go up into Data Spreadsheet so we can look at the list of fixtures. And here we are. What I'll do first is I will click on the patch column header to sort this column in ascending order. Okay, now that the patch column is sorted in ascending order, I'll use one of my favorite features of the spreadsheet, which works very nicely when patching fixtures consecutively. And I'll point out that this is not a new feature of R43, but it is a very useful one, and it's been there for a long time and not everybody knows about it, so I wanted to include it in today's webinar. Since I sorted the patch column in ascending order, I can start by selecting the first fixture from the patch column. So I selected its patch cell, and then using click and drag or click and shift click, you can select all fixtures listed in this file as I just did, and they're highlighted in orange. And what I'll do now is I want to change the patch to a DMX universe. So I'll type in DMX space A.1 and I will include the plus sign. So this plus sign or plus operator at the end of the starting address tells wysiwyg that you want to patch all fixtures selected one after another, and wysiwyg will automatically patch them consecutively for you. If you leave out the plus operator, then the fixtures will all be patched to the same starting address, which in this case would be DMXA.1. But that's not what we want to do here. We want to have them consecutively patched. So I've put the plus sign and I will hit enter. Okay, and because there are 30 fixtures and they don't all fit consecutively in the one universe, this dialog is asking if we wish to create a new universe for the ones that do not fit. So I'll select create new universe, and I'll select DMXB since it's already created for me. Click OK. And here we go. Now we have all of our 30 fixtures, which were previously on Universe EDMX, and we've just repatched them very easily to DMX universes A and B. And this file can be used now with ArtNet or Streaming ACN or any other console that you wish. So let's resave this file as a DMX demo file for future use. And I'll click OK and overwrite that. And there we go. Now we're going to switch back into CAD wireframe, and we're going to, for document options, we've made a minor change which really does not change the functionality of the options in any way, but we made this change to hopefully clarify for all our users the effect of the options in the wireframe details and fixture attribute details properties tabs. So let me open options, document options, and let's start with the wireframe details. And here we are. And as you can see, this properties tab does not look very different than before. It actually has the exact same listed items in the table. The only difference that I'll point out for you is right here in the column header. Previously this was named plots, and now we've renamed it to wireframes and layouts. We've done this to make it clear that these options affect the appearance of the listed items on both wireframe views and on layout views. And this previously was not clear for all users and it was causing some confusion. So we've made this very minor change. And at the same time, on Fixture Attribute Details tab, I'll repeat that all the items in this list are exactly the same as before, but you'll notice a little bit of change up here in the table header. Again, no changes to the functionality of this table, but we did make changes up in the column headers. So the first one over here was previously named plots, and now it's wireframes and layouts. Moving over to the second column, previously this was named wireframe details, and now we've changed it to fixture tooltips. Again, this affects the fixture attributes information that appears in the tooltip when you hover over it with your cursor. And lastly, right over here, the third column is shaded views, and there's no change here. This was previously shaded views as well, and this affects the information on the tooltips that appear in the shaded view when you put your cursor over them and you see the text appear. Again, functionality, there is no difference to the changes we've made in these document options. These checkboxes control the same properties as before, but through the support cases and feedback that we've received from some users, we felt that renaming these column titles would make the options and the intended results of the checkboxes more apparent. So we've gone ahead and done that. Let me click OK here and close the document options. We're done with those. And lastly, I'm going to open View Options and bring up the View Options dialog. And for this, again, we're going back to Fixture Attribute Details. So the changes that we just described for the table up in the document options, because it appears here in the View Options of wireframe views and shaded views, I want to bring this up as well. All the changes that we made to this table have been propagated down, so the column changes, wireframe and layouts column title is here as well, as is the fixture tooltips. But I do want to point out one new thing that we've added. We've added the Get Document Settings button. This button will retrieve the values that were set on the Fixture Attribute Details tab at the document option. So let's say you're working in here and you make changes to a bunch of rows and turning checkboxes on and off, and then you get lost, you don't remember what you want, and you want to reset everything. Before, this was a manual process. Now it's really easy. You just click down on the Get Document Settings button and it automatically resets this table for you back to the same checkboxes, so the same states as you would have at the document options level. So it's just a quick way to reset everything and get everything reorganized for yourself. Okay, so that is all of the changes I want to talk to you about for the options in R43. Okay, so let's start off by exploring some of the new shaded view features of R43. And we'll start with two small enhancements. First, which I'll show you from the CAD Shaded View tab. So here we are in the CAD Shaded View. Let me remind everyone that in R43, again, I'm using the colorful icon set, just to differentiate with R42, where I'm using the orange icon set. I'll start with talking about the Shaded View Fixture Tooltip feature. The Shaded View Fixture Tooltips was a feature that we introduced in R42, and it was to show fixture attribute information in the shaded views like we do in wireframe views. To improve legibility, in R43, the Fixture Tooltips will now display each fixture attribute on a separate line of text. So I'll come up into the Options, Document Options, and we'll go to Fixture Attribute Details tab. And we'll go over to the last column, the Shaded Views column, where I've already have enabled the Spot attribute, the Patch attribute, and the Mode attribute. So that's fine. I'll click OK now. And we have to go over into the View Options, and in the General tab, go down to the bottom and just make sure that the Fixture Tooltips option has been enabled. So it is. So I'll click OK. So I'll bring my cursor over, and here we are. I have a fixture, the Scenic Spot, and I have its fixture attributes displayed nicely and very legible across 3 separate rows. I have the type, the patch information, and the spot. I'll try a different fixture type. I'll go in there, and basically all the fixtures are showing their information. Now let's compare it to R42. So I'll bring up R42, and you know that it's R42 with the orange icons. And again, let's make sure I have the feature enabled, which I do. And same information on the same fixture, and as you can see, it's across one line of text, which makes it a little bit harder to read. This one's not so bad because the fixture name and the universe are pretty short, but if you get fixtures with very long names and long universe names, depending on the amount of information you are showing, the text could actually be cut off the screen. So we've made this change in R43 to separate it on different lines. So that way, if you do show 4, 5, 6 attributes, the information will be very easy to read for everyone. Okay, perfect. So that is this feature. I will now turn it off from the fixture tooltips, and we won't see tooltips anymore appearing in the shaded view. And then the next enhancement I want to talk about is the camera path text now appearing in world space rather than in screen space like before. And for this one, I will go over to my layer database. I have this layer called camera path, and I will make it visible. And by doing so, now you see there we have a camera path drawn in my file on the orange layer, so we have an orange spline up here. I'll do the same thing in R42, same file, so I'll enable the same layer, and there we have the orange spline also appearing. Camera path text appearing in world space rather than in screen space. Basically what this means is that the text of the camera path, or these node numbers, will be displayed at the correct depth respecting X, Y, Z. So if they appear behind an object, they will now appear behind the object or not appear on screen at all. Previously, that wasn't the case. So in R42, if I move my camera so that I have these objects that are now in front of the camera path, as you can see, I still have the text peeking through incorrectly because they should not be appearing at all. I'll switch over to R43 and do basically the same thing, move my camera, and now I've blocked that camera path with these objects, and obviously this barrier is in front of the camera path in respect to my camera position, and now the text is no longer visible until I move it, and now the camera or the camera path nodes reappear. Okay, so that's it for the camera path enhancements. I'll go over to the layer database and turn this layer off so the camera path now disappears. And for the next shaded view feature for displaying camera models in shaded view, I'll switch over to design mode. Great. A new feature of the shaded view in R43 is the representation of static cameras in the shaded view. Taking the same strategy of what we do already in the wireframe views when we have a static camera drawn in your project, we now display a simple camera model in the shaded view to represent its position and orientation. This feature is on by default for new files drawn in R43, but because I'm using an older file that was drawn in a previous version, it has to be turned on from the view options. So I'll go into my shaded view, right click, and open up view options. And you could find the option in the camera tab properties. So scroll down to the bottom part of this page, and over here you'll see that we've added a new group box called camera model. And there's a checkbox here for displaying the model, which is currently off, and I'll select it. And right away you see that some camera models appeared behind this dialog in my shaded view. To the right of this checkbox is another one called Display Tooltips, which is currently enabled. This allows for the camera names to be displayed in the shaded view as tooltips. So I'll keep that on because I want to see the names of the cameras. Perfect. I'll click OK now. So from this camera position, you can see that I've drawn a few cameras in my file. But since you're not familiar with my file, you don't know which cameras they are. So this is a great example of how this feature can be useful. So we'll hover over a camera, say the one to the far right top corner, and you can see that it's named angle down. Moving down to another one, let's say the one down in the bottom, this one's called Singer. This now gives you information of the camera locations and their names in my file, in case you need to change them to a predefined camera from the camera dropdown, which would be up here. So you would be able to find the Singer and switch to it, which I'm not going to do at this time. What I'll do instead is I'll switch to the world camera, which gives me the ability to move around freely. So that way you can look around my scene and look at some of the different camera models more closely. So I'll turn the camera view this way and I'll zoom in as such. I also wanted to point out to you that just like in wireframe views, the triangular pyramids at the front of the camera models, as you can see there between these two cameras, they represent the field angles of the camera and will resize with the field angle of the camera as it's changed. The narrow triangle represents a smaller field angle compared to the one below it, which has a higher field angle. So therefore this one is called Singer Zoomed and this camera is called Singer. Since we've learned which one my Singer camera is, let's go up to the top and select Singer from the drop-down, and there we are. We're now looking at my file from the Singer camera position. And from here you can see also that I have another camera that was drawn over to stage right, pointing up into the beams. You may want to keep these camera models in your file during your design stages of your project. But once you're happy with your design and your camera positions are now set, I think it's time to toggle off the camera models. So that means going back into the view options, back to the camera tab, and selecting the display model checkbox this time to go off. And definitely when you reach the stage of recording a video for your show, which we'll be talking about next, you don't want to see any camera models in your shaded view. Alright, let's talk about the shaded view output tool. We've introduced a shaded view output tool in R43, and it's been quietly sitting over there on the right side of the window, along with the other wysiwyg tools. Let's move my cursor over here. There it is, the shaded view output tool. Similar to other tools, the shaded view output tool can be pinned by clicking on the pin, and it sticks on screen, or it can be unpinned, and when you hover over it, it auto hides when you move your cursor away. You can also open it by right-clicking on the toolbars, and we'll go down. There it is, the shaded view output tool, by clicking on it there, or by using the keyboard shortcut, which is Control-Alt and the letter O. I'll click off there. Since we're going to be using this tool, I'm going to close the layer database now. The shaded view output tool will be available in any mode which has a shaded view. So yes, that would be CAD mode, design mode, and live modes. For this demo, I'll be working in design mode. Let me go to the shaded view output tool and I will pin it so that way it stays open. And let's focus on the shaded view recording first, which is the first part of this tool. Down there on the second part or lower down, you'll see that there's the NDI output functionality as well. So for the shaded view recording, this feature records WYSIWYG's shaded view stream natively to an MP4 file within the WYSIWYG application. As you can see from having this tool open, we've introduced a few options for the settings of the outputted video file, which I will explore in a minute. I guess I should also mention at this time, since we've introduced this new internal recording feature, we decided it was time to do away with Cam Studio. So Cam Studio is now gone and no longer packaged with the WYSIWYG installer, as you probably already noticed while installing R43. So here we go. Basically, let's set up our shaded view. So in this case, I will probably switch over to my different camera, camera 2, and for this I will use a different look. So I'll set up my look. So there we are, what you would usually do when you're starting to record. And I will click on the shaded view, so that way it is now selected, and move over to the shaded view output tool and click on Start. And note the new message across the top of the shaded view in the caption bar. In red text, it says recording, and there is a elapsed time incrementing as the recording is happening. So if you wish to stop the recording, scroll back over, and using the same button, now you click on Stop. You'll also notice that the caption bar is no longer outputting the recording in red text. Another option, if you prefer using keyboard shortcuts, which some of you do, have the shaded view selected, and this time you could use the Control button plus the space bar. So I'll do that right now, Control plus space bar, and you can now see that the recording has started again. This time I will unlock my camera. I'll set it to the world camera, therefore you could see that I'm recording the camera movements as well. And in this case, I will stop it the same way with the Control space bar keyboard shortcut. And again, we've stopped recording. So now you're probably asking, where are the videos that we just recorded? Well, to find them, all we have to do is go over to the shaded view output tool and go click on the button here beside the output path, which is labeled Change Paths. Clicking this button opens up the Application Options File Location Properties tab, and down at the bottom of this page we've added a new group box right here, which is called Shaded View Recordings. And in there are two new properties. One is for the temp location, or the temporary location of the recorded file as it's recording. And the second one is file location, which is the final destination of the recorded MP4 file. So this is the one that we're interested in. So I will select it and Control C to copy. So now I have the path where the files are located, and I'll click OK. And I'll go open a File Explorer window. And here is my Explorer window. And here's the folder that has the two videos that were recorded from the shaded view recording. Here's the first one, and this is the second one. Since I did not edit any of the settings in the shaded view output tool, the videos I just recorded are set to their default settings, which is, as you can see, medium quality and 30 FPS. And the video file names were automatically set to the wysiwyg file and the date timestamp, as you can see right here. But if you want to adjust some of the settings, the shaded view output tool is where you go to control the recording options. So I'm sure you all want to do that. So let's close this window and we'll go back over to the shaded view output tool. And going from top to bottom, after the record button, we have our quality drop-down, which has low, medium, and high quality options. The FPS, or frames per second, has 24, 25, 30, and 60 as FPS options. And the duration has stopping manually, so that's what we've been doing, stopping and starting manually. Or we have some predefined durations of 1 minute, 2, 5, 10, and 15 minutes. At the bottom, we have a custom option. It is totally up to you what settings you use, but for this example, I'll set the quality to high. I'll set the FPS to 60. And this time, rather than doing manual stop-start, I will use custom. And when you select custom, you have the custom time text box that becomes enabled. So once you click in here, you can enter your custom value. So let's say I type in 100 and I hit tab. 100 gets interpreted as 100 seconds. So it has displayed now 1 minute and 40 seconds. I'll select this, and you could also type it with the colon. So let me type in 2 30 for 2 minutes 30 seconds, and this time I'll hit enter, and as you can see it's accepted that input and it's displaying 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So that would be the length of the recording. You're probably wondering if you could also enter with M and S for minutes and seconds. You cannot. So let me just show you that. I'll type in 3M45S, and as you can see it clearly shows the pink background, which is alerting the user that this is invalid input. So we won't use that anymore, or we can't use that. So what I'll do actually is I'll type in something short, probably 20, and I'll hit enter. So this represents 20 seconds. So I'll record a high quality 60 frame per second video, but this time I will uncheck save automatically. By unchecking save automatically, when I now start the recording, it will record, but at the end of the recording time of 20 seconds, a dialog will prompt me to enter the video file name I wish to save the file with. So let's go ahead and record this video. I'll click on start. And let's move the camera around a little bit. And there's the 20 seconds, and here's the dialog that appears, which is prompting me for the file name. I'll call this R43 webinar and click save. Let's watch the video. And so what I've also done for you is I've recorded 2 videos with medium 30 frames per second and another video with high and 60 frames per second, just so that way we can compare how much the difference is in file size. I thought you guys might be interested to see this. So just give me 1 second as I call up the file. Okay, I found the videos. Here they are. Bring it on screen for you. So I have a file which I recorded. It's a 45-second video file. The first one I recorded at high properties, so high quality with 60 FPS. The second one, which I recorded, was at medium quality, 30 FPS. It was a 45-second video, same resolution, 1774 by 850. Actually comparing the 2 video outputs side by side, in this case, they seem to be pretty close. And overall, I think this shaded view recording feature is pretty cool. Okay, that's it for the shaded view recording feature. Please give it a try and let us know what you think. And finally, the second feature offered through the shaded view output tool is the NDI output. Let me bring my cursor over to the NDI output section, which is the second section of the shaded view output. And it's a pretty simple feature. It has one button. It has a NDI stream start and stop button. So as you guessed, it works very similar to the shaded view recording. You select the shaded view you wish to output to NDI, and then click on the start button. So I'll do that right now. And similar to shaded view recording, there's text that appears up in the gray caption bar across or above the shaded view, and this one says NDI streaming. So at the moment, NDI should be streaming out. The way we can check that is by bringing over an NDI Studio Monitor application. So I have one of these open already. And let's check in the menu, and it finds the stream. And there you have the NDI stream coming from wysiwyg. So if I move the camera around, you can see that it's updating in the NDI stream. Perfect. So let me actually change one of the looks. And as I'm changing a look, it would be obviously streaming across the NDI network as well. So like the shaded view recording feature, there's also the ability to start and stop it using keyboard shortcuts. So for the NDI output, it would be Control, Shift, and Spacebar. Started NDI output. As you can see, it's streaming up there. Why don't I use my cue list editor and set it to play. So there you go, there's the NDI output feeding out across the network. And I'll use, again, Control Shift Spacebar to stop it there. And because it's stopped, therefore it's no longer updating the frame anymore. Perfect. So what I'm going to try to do now is I'm going to go over into the Quad tab of Design Mode. And my Quad tab is ready. And as you can see, I've set up my Quad tab with 4 different quadrants that are all shaded views, and they're all set to different cameras. So my top left is set to camera 1, my bottom left is set to camera 5, top right is set to angled side, camera 7, and bottom right is set to camera 8, stage right. So I have 4 different cameras that are drawn in my file. And what I want to do is I want to start multiple NDI outputs at the same time. So I'll go over to my top left, which is camera 1, and I will start streaming NDI output. And I'll go check to see if my NDI output has updated, which it seems like it has. And now I'll select my top right quadrant, and because this one is not started, the start button is available here. If I select the top left one, which is started, you see that the button is stop when I have that one selected. So I'll go back to the right quadrant and I will start another NDI output, this time with the top right quadrant. And I have another studio monitor. So this one is actually set up for this quadrant, the right quadrant, and I'll move this one over here because it's set to the left quadrant. So I'll set it up accordingly. And I'll even start my cue list, so that way I can start to output. Bring that back. I can start to output my cue list editor, and as you can see, I'm outputting 2 different NDI streams at the same time. That's a lot of work right now going on my computer at the moment, but as you can see, it's all currently working perfectly. This does take up more processing power, of course, and you could continue to add more NDI outputs with different shaded view cameras and shaded view with different shaded views set with different cameras if you wish. There is a limit though based on your hardware and processing power, but I encourage you to try it out. And so since I have 2 outputs running at the same time, rather than individually stopping them, I could go up to the top and we have a master stop all outputs. So if I click on this, it will actually stop all of my NDI outputs at the same time. And as you can see, this one has stopped receiving input from wysiwyg, and this one has also stopped as well. So both NDI streams have stopped, and the NewTek NDI application has stopped updating. So I will minimize this one and minimize this one, and I will stop the cue list. A few notes for you. before we end the topic of shaded view output. Switching away from a mode or a tab that has shaded view recording enabled or NDI output enabled will stop either one of those outputs from continuing. So basically, if I have NDI started here and I switch away, when I come back, the NDI stream has stopped. So you cannot switch, it will automatically stop what it's outputting. Also, if I have NDI outputting here on my right quadrant, top right quadrant, and I wish to start recording, as you can see, it won't allow me to start recording because I have an NDI stream going on. If I use my keyboard shortcuts, so Control Spacebar, there's a dialog that appears that says currently there's an NDI stream in progress. If you wish to switch to recording the shaded view, you must first stop NDI streaming. And you have two options there, which are stop NDI streaming and that's it, or stop NDI streaming and then start recording. So for now, I'm just going to hit cancel. And the opposite is true too. If you were recording the shaded view and then you wanted to start an NDI stream, you would get the same dialog, but the reverse message would be shown. So I guess this wraps up the NDI output functionality and overall the shaded view output tool and its features. These are both great features in R43, and I'm sure you'll start to incorporate these into your projects as you need them. And if you do start to do some recordings that are really attractive, please feel free to share with us or with our marketing team, and we would love to share your projects on our social media pages. So now let's start to take a look at some other features in R43. This time we'll look at the extension to the custom tabs feature, which is used to set up custom workspaces, which was previously a CAD only feature, but in R43 has been extended to design mode and live mode. Just to introduce the feature for everyone who hasn't used custom tabs. Custom tabs were previously introduced a few releases ago, and they allow you to define a customized tab view layout that better suits your working preferences. Like I mentioned in my R42 webinar, I like to set up my view tab with a vertically split view containing a wireframe window on the left and a shaded view on the right side. So let's go ahead and repeat this custom tab in my R43. So I come down to the bottom and I click on the plus tab, and the new custom tab window appears, and I'll name this wireframe shaded. I'll select the two panes vertically split option, and then for pane number 1 I will use the wireframe view, and for pane number 2 I'll use the shaded view. But this of course isn't new since I showed you this last time. But what is new for custom tabs in R43 is that you can create the custom tabs for design and live mode exactly like you would have done previously for CAD mode. Or, as you can see at the bottom of this dialog, we have an option named Show in All Other Modes, which when enabled will create this wireframe and shaded custom tab, or any custom tab that you define, in all the other modes, so not just the current mode that you're in. So in my case, I'm in CAD mode, so this will create it in CAD mode when I click OK, but it'll also create it in design and live modes as well because I left the checkbox enabled. So here we are in CAD mode, and down at the bottom we now have the wireframe shaded tab, and on screen you can see that I have my custom setup, custom tab with my wireframe on the left and my shaded view on the right. Let's quickly hover over the top mode buttons, and you'll see over here we have the wireframe shaded, which I just created. But as I go over to design now, you see that there is a wireframe shaded tab, and in live mode there is also a wireframe and shaded tab. I'll go down to the bottom, and what I'll do is I'll right click on this tab to bring up the Custom Tab Manager. In the Custom Tab Manager, right here in this window, you'll see that this list is now presented as a table with 3 columns: the CAD column, Design column, and Live column. And each row represents one of the custom tabs that are created, which at the moment I only have the one that I just created, wireframe shaded. With this table, it is easy to configure which mode you would like your custom tabs to appear. For example, let's say I don't want the custom tab to appear in live mode. I would scroll over to the 3rd column, and on this cell where the eyeball is, I would click on it, and now I get the red circle with the bar through it, which represents no, and therefore the wireframe shaded would become invisible or not visible in live mode if I click close. So I'll do that, and we'll go back up to the top, and we still have it in the wireframe. In the CAD mode, we still have the wireframe and shaded tab. In design, we still have the wireframe and shaded tab, but in live mode, we don't have it listed anymore. If you do change your mind and want to bring it back, it's really easy. Just go back down to the tabs, right click, open up the Custom Tab Manager, and from here you just go back to the cell that is currently set to invisible. Click it so that now it's set to visible again, and when I close it, if I go back up to the live mode, I have my wireframe and shaded tab. But rather than showing you by the mode list dropdown, let's actually switch to design mode and go to this custom tab and see it in design mode. So there you have it. You have your wireframe on the left and the shaded view on the right, and it works interactively. So if I switch to a different look, they would both be updated as you would expect. At this time, I guess I should also mention that for the custom tabs in design and live mode, the wireframe and shaded views that appear in the custom tab for design mode and live mode would be the wireframe and shaded view of that mode. But the spreadsheet and the patch view are the same everywhere across all modes. So before we move on, why don't we go down to the plus tab, which appears in design mode now. And in this case, let's, from design mode, create another custom tab. I'll call it wireframe spreadsheet and shaded. And this time I will go with a 3-pane, which has the horizontal on the left and the large shaded on the right. And I'll set this one to be wireframe, number 2 to be spreadsheet, and number 3 is the shaded view. And by keeping this checkbox enabled, it will be created in all 3 modes. So I'll click OK here, and it's creating the tabs for me. And now we have the wireframe on the top, the spreadsheet bottom left, and we still have the large shaded view on my right side as I've specified from design mode. And it also appears here in live, and it appears here in CAD. Well, that's really everything that there is to discuss about the custom tab feature. I encourage you to try it out and create custom workspaces that work for you. Another feature that received some updates in R43 is the importing models feature when importing files from OBJ, FBX, Collada, and 3ds files. So let's switch over to the CAD mode, and we'll go to the wireframe shaded custom tab that we just created. And I'll go over to File and open up this OBJ file. Click No here. The file that I'm about to import is an OBJ file of the famous Christ the Redeemer statue in Brazil. Okay, so here's the scale dialog that appears when you're importing one of these files. So the first thing I want to mention from the scale dialog is found at the second item at the top of the window. So in this drop down, when defining the base point of the file being imported, we previously only had two options, which was exact center, which was previously center of model, and the bottom center. In R43, we've added two additional options, which are average center and don't change. Average center examines the geometry in the file and calculates where the average center would be based on the geometry. And don't change is exactly what it means. It doesn't change what the base point of the imported file will be. It remains as is. Okay, so those are some of the additions while importing scale. For this one, I will select bottom center as my option. The other enhancement that was made is down at the bottom of this dialog in the mesh decimation section. So in the mesh decimation section, in addition to the previous option to decimate the model's appearance in shaded views, which is the first one here, and the reason why you would do this is if you were importing a complex model with large number of faces. By decimating it, you would reduce the complexity of the imported object to hopefully achieve higher performance in the shaded view. Well, now a decimation procedure is also introduced for wireframe views, which is the second checkbox, which is the one right here. And you can select this, and by doing that, you would decimate the wireframe model representation, reducing the complexity and the number of faces the model would import into wysiwyg. And by doing that, you're again sacrificing quality, but you are gaining performance. So for the first import, we're going to actually leave this off, and we will bring in the model in its default number of faces. So we will create a base case. And for this object, I need to switch this so that the y-axis points up, and I want to specify a auto scale, and this statue is actually 30 meters tall, so I'll set it to 30 meters tall along its longest side, and I will click Finish to import it. And there you go. And the import summary says that the number of faces is 55,600 and the number of vertices is 30,402. And there is the statue being loaded in wysiwyg. So I will take this wireframe, switch to the left view, and click on Z to zoom fit, and there you could see the wireframe representation of the statue. On the right side, I will increase the ambient light, and I will zoom out a little bit, and I will turn them all around as such. And you could see that this is the statue of Christ the Redeemer. Perfect. So what I will do now is I will re-import the same OBJ file, but this time I will set a decimation value for the wireframe. Okay, so I'll repeat what I said before. So this would be y-axis, this would be bottom center. I will set this back to 30. And now for the mesh decimation, I will set reduce polygons in your wireframe model to, and I'll set that to 50, so half of the amount, and click finish. And here it is. So originally it was 55,600. So now the number of faces, as you can see, is 27,800 in wireframe. And the number of vertices is also divided into 2. So it will be coming in with 15,294. Click OK. And I'll do the exact same thing. Come over to wireframe, go to the left side, use the Z keyboard shortcut to zoom fit. And in the shaded view, I will set the ambient light to 100 and zoom out a little bit and try to match what we had before. So as you can see on the right side here in the shaded view, the model in the shaded view visualization is perfectly intact. It did not get affected at all by this mesh decimation. On the other hand, the wireframe representation on the left side, you can kind of see that there are some lines, less lines in this model, which means it would be performing much faster, especially if you have a lot of objects like this one in your file. So let's go one step further, and I'm going to do it one more time. This time I will set it to the 10% for the wireframe mesh decimation. So again, y-axis, bottom center, 30, and we'll do 10. That's everything. Click finish. So it's done really quickly. So it's 10%. So in this case, the number of faces is 5,559. The number of vertices is 3,280. And click OK to import the file. And we'll do the same thing for the third time. Going into the wireframe, select the left view, use the Z keyboard to zoom fit. Open up the view options, increase ambient light, and then try to get the same camera position as before. So that's close enough. As you can see, I did a mesh decimation on the wireframe, and you can clearly see now that the number of faces in this model is visibly decreased, but on the shaded view side, the model in the shaded view is perfectly intact. So that is the benefit of having this new option. You could decrease the complexity of your wireframe model without decreasing the quality in the shaded view. So just another option when working with larger files, and if you find performance being an issue in wireframes, this may be an answer for you. So wanted to point it out. So starting now with the last video, which is going to go over the VR enhancements. This is a short video that was created by our marketing team to highlight some of the additions that came in R43 in the VR mode, which are the VR minimap, new controller gestures, switching cameras by using the new camera models, and a few additions to the options in VR.
with us. Perfect. Sorry about that. The mic here was creating problems. But all right, so we could not play a bit of the final part of the second video, but we will make that available for you very soon. And in the meantime, we've just watched the VR video. Please do submit your questions about VR if you have any. We've already received a few questions here from people about some of the features that were presented. And let's see here. We have a question from Dan Kanan. Dan is asking, what about recording from wysiwyg with sound in the new recorder?
Hey, Dan. Hey, Dan. So yes, that is a great feature. We have already started to explore adding sound to our shaded view recordings. It's been a suggestion that's come up once or twice already in the last few weeks from other users. So it's currently possibly an R44, R45 feature that we're investigating in on the moment. Looking down, we have another question here from Bob. Recordings were still a little shocky. Even on your PC, the shaded view recording, is the shaded view recording going to be a key focus of development going forward? I think there's a lot of potential here. Bob, definitely. We have delivered for you the first phase of shaded view recording for R43. We have a few things that are in the pipeline that we're planning to do in the future. One of them, as we mentioned, is possibly adding audio, and there are a few other features as well that we're currently looking into. So stay tuned for that. Another question on shaded view recording from Amir. What is the resolution that you could record your files? Is it the actual screen resolution? So yes, you've answered your question. So the resolution of the shaded view recorded file, it's an MP4 file and it matches the screen resolution of the OpenGL window that it was started from. So if you're starting from, say, a smaller shaded view from a quad, you'll see the resolution on the stats. If you turn that on, that would be the resolution of the video. If you do a larger window, it'll be larger. If you go full screen, it'll be the full screen of your laptop or computer's resolution. Personally, I've done most of my videos at 720, or the ones that are in the webinar are almost 1080p. They're just short because I cut off the bar at the bottom, but I've also tested up to 4K, and you could record 4K videos from wysiwyg with this feature. And in terms of the length of a video, we did set a limit to 60 minutes total. So that's the maximum length of the shaded view recording that you can do. Another question just came in. Is there any option to record timecode in shaded view? Charles, at the moment, no, there isn't, but this is also a discussion that I've had previously with a fellow developer, and we're looking into this potential feature for an upcoming release. Now that we have shaded view recording, it would be a great addition to work with it.
All right. So this seems to be all the questions that we've received so far. We haven't, let's see, nothing from VR yet. Feel free to message us at webinar@cast-soft.com with further questions, and we will address those by email as well. Here's one more. Let's go through this one more question before we wrap up. This is coming from Ferenc. Hi, Ferenc. So Ferenc asks, develop the file. Do you have plans to develop the file export to OBJ?
Hi, Ferenc. So that's a great question. Actually, what we're looking at is being able to export, possibly not to OBJ, but more likely to FBX. But OBJ is definitely an option. The one that we currently are looking at though is FBX. I think it would still deliver what you're looking for, including textures with the exported file. Yep, something that we've already started to look at. Question coming in is there a free trial for R43 so we can try that out? And yes, there is. There is a DV version of wysiwyg R43. I know that our QA team is currently testing, so stay tuned. It's probably a day or so away before it actually gets posted online. But there will be one definitely for sure, and our marketing team will send out an email announcing it.
Perfect. Thank you, Dino, once again. And before we wrap up, I want to mention that our next webinar should be a lot more interactive, and it's called Live Questions and Answers with Danny Tangu. For those of you who still don't know or haven't spoken to Danny, Danny is the wysiwyg Tech Support Manager and Product Manager Assistant here at CAST. Danny brings a vast knowledge of wysiwyg CAD modeling to the table, so don't miss this webinar. It's going to be an interesting one, and the content is literally driven by you through your questions. During the registration process, you will be able to submit a few questions by email, and some of those will be pre-selected to be answered live, as well as we will receive a few live questions during the webinar as well. And just a reminder that this webinar is being recorded and will soon be sent to all attendees. We will make sure that when the webinar is sent to you, it includes the piece of video that we could not play now. So we will try to fix that very quick and then send it your way so you can finish watching it at the end of the day. And I think that's it for us here from CAST. Thank you all for joining. And we hope to see you in the next webinar.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time, and maybe we'll see you in a month's time at LDI. Take care.